May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. We all remember the story of Whiskey Galore, the sad wartime tale of a remote island in the west which had run out of whiskey, the water of life. And lo and behold, a ship laden with some 40,000 cases of the golden liquid runs aground in the fog at that very island. And the ever-helpful islanders inquire politely of the nature of the cargo. We remember this. And indeed, the Scottish form of manna from heaven, notwithstanding the eighth commandment about not stealing, and they proceeded to lighten the ship, you understand. No doubt it would assist in refloating her at the next spring high tide, maybe. And then midnight strikes. It is the Sabbath. And you cannot loot a stranded ship upon the Sabbath. It is not done. And so they must spend the Sabbath in prayerful contemplation of life and all aspects of it, assisted by a particularly long and earnest sermon in church. And then midnight on the Sabbath itself strikes, and they are free to resume the normal weekly business of life. It is Monday, and the day's business remains to be done. We may smile sympathetically at this rather broad application of the Sabbath and the Ten Commandments. Except, of course, when we ourselves want a loaf of bread or a pint of milk, and we go out to the shop and get it, Sabbath or no. And then, of course, we still expect the police, the firefighters, the ambulance crews, the A&E department to be functioning 24/7 and therefore upon the Sabbath as well. The trouble is that in Jesus' time, the Sabbath was observed a lot more strictly, at least by the practitioners of the religious law. And healing was a work that could be done on any other day of the week, certainly making of a small mud. And so the Sabbath had been broken in their eyes. And even if the same authorities would still take their horse or their donkey or their oxen or whatever livestock it was and make sure that it's properly watered 7 days a week, including the Sabbath. That's another matter, of course. So when on the Sabbath Jesus healed the blind man, blind from birth, there were going to be a lot of questions, and the first of them came from the disciples. Who sinned, this man or his parents? Frankly, it's not the brightest of questions when referring to a man born blind, as if he was able to sin so grievously in his mother's womb that he would be born blind. It's a bit of a no-brainer, frankly. But then the Pharisees got stuck in. They took their turn. You can't do that sort of thing on the Sabbath. As we say down south, you can't do that there here. It's a sin. Trouble is that the blind man was quite insistent about the facts. Born blind, now healed. The work of a sinner, really? More like the work of a prophet in this man's estimation. So how on earth were the Pharisees going to evade the fact of the healing? The evidence was plain for all to see, surely. That's the trouble with evidence, though. What is plain to one person is disputed by another. It becomes personal, even subjective. It's never really conclusive, for it's of the nature of that evidence that it must be accepted and persuasive if it's going to have any effect. I believe even now there are people who believe that the earth is flat. And that is before we go into our many conspiracy theories in the blogosphere and the press and every other area of public dispute and debate. And in a court case, it becomes a matter of testing the evidence to see, and the witnesses to see whether they stand up or whether there are any flaws in the case being presented and which could affect its outcome. Evidence is not that simple. Even the healing of a man born blind, that evidence is going to be contested. And what the church takes for granted is bitterly contested by those who deny its faith. Even apparently overwhelming evidence can be a matter of debate. It is subjective, you understand. And so Jesus brought us back to basics. I am the light of the world. I am. He was the healer. The blind man now healed, was definitely convinced of the fact, and he wanted to follow Jesus. Jesus, who shines his light into the depths of our lives and into the depths of our human and our social disputes. It is his being and his word that makes all the difference, and it is direct and personal to each of us. And so on this Mothering Sunday, we also wish to shine some light onto family life. And that light is the light of Jesus Christ. And the object of that light is our memories of our mothers and of mothering generally. The memories are mainly of a time when we were at our most vulnerable personally, but our mothers were also personally highly vulnerable. And so the memories are, for many of the memories are of a happy family life. But for others, the memories are a bit more mixed. The tensions of life. Those of us whose parents went through the Second World War, went through all sorts of tensions and fears and anxieties. And so there were stresses of rationing, and then there's inflation, and then there's the unemployment, and the demands of fathers coming back from the war, and the needs of all other family members. Not an easy time. For many, it was a time of thanksgiving. But for others, it also leads us into forgiving and understanding the tensions of the times. Was the baby wanted? Was it the firstborn, the middleborn, the lastborn? A pregnancy desired, or perhaps a pregnancy endured, maybe even one that was feared? Was a mother in her homeland, or was she a stranger in a strange place? Were there other family members around to help, or was she on her own? To sentimentalize motherhood does not do our mothers any favors, and perhaps the most sacrificial model of all is Hannah. She was granted her wish to be a mother, but she had already committed herself and her baby to the service of God. She was already committed to letting go and not being there for when the child became a toddler, and then a child, and then grew up and became a man. This perhaps is the most demanding aspect of all. It's the letting go, the saying goodbye, the being left with memories of that childhood. And so where our mothers are living, we can maintain our relationships in keeping with the things of our times. Where they are departed and live upon a further shore and in a greater light, we may commend them into the love and mercy of God. Where motherhood is a future prospect, then we may commend our futures also into the hands of God. And for those whose children are still around them, it is time for entrusting them into the purposes of the Lord in difficult and challenging and dangerous times. Amen.